Go over the assignment. So the assignment is based on XML, and it has two questions, 50 points each. And what it asks you is to manipulate or interact with an XML document. The XML document is site.xml, and it represents data that might be used to describe a website, right? So, for instance, this is a site whose ID is W123. The name is website 1, and it contains views and it contains components. Okay. The views, it contains two views, page 1 and page 2. With IDs P123 and P234, and each one of the views has description and contains several components. The description here is lorem ipsum, and the components are these two. Notice that the components are actually referencing WG123 and WG1234, which are actually declared elsewhere in the components section down here. So here's components, and it declares three components. Components WG123, WG1234, 234, and 2345. And they're different types. They're text, they're images, they're YouTube, and they're buttons. Make sense? And so what it asks you to do is to write an XLT transformer that will take this site, parse it as an XML document, and will apply an XSLT document called site to website.xsl that transform the XML document in site.xml, and let's see, that transform the XML document above into an XML document called site.xml, shown below in figure 2. Okay, I'm sorry, this is supposed to say website. Website XML shown in figure number 2. So this is the output. The output is supposed to look like this. So you have two XML documents. One has a particular schema, and the other one has a different schema. Right? It contains the same content, the same information, but structured in a different way. Right? It's just like you would have two SQL tables, right, that might contain the same information, but in different structures. Okay? So this one looks very similar to the other one, but notice that here the content is spread out over two parent elements, right? Under views you have views, but then they reference components that are referenced on the components. See that? So it's a little bit flatter. What this is asking you to do is to make it a little more hierarchical. So basically, grab the components and wherever they are being referenced, actually paste them in there. Right. So if this says component WG123, then this component should end up in here. And if this references WG1234, excuse me, WG1234, it should end up in here. Make sense? But also the names of the elements should be different. So let's see. The above site.xml should end up looking like this. Instead of site 123, it'll be website ID W123. The same name as earlier, same description. Description. I guess we need a description. Here, description. So you use as an attribute, and you're going to convert it into an element. And instead of views, you'll have pages. Page two pages. Notice that here there are two views. They get converted into pages. Same IDs and the same name with the descriptions above in the views, and these get converted into from components, right? They're converted into widgets. But notice that instead of being in a separate element of widgets, right? They are embedded in their pages. Yes, makes sense. All right. So transforming one XML document to another XML document. It's a very, very common thing to do when you have multiple when you interact, especially if you're a vendor or you are a producing for a company that has many vendors. Oftentimes like maybe Ford Motor Company buys doors from a whole bunch of places, or windows, or nuts and bolts from many different vendors, and they have requirements that they need to submit their orders or submit any reports in a particular format, right? And so oftentimes the vendors will have their own specific schema on how they represent their bolts and their products, right? But because they need to adhere to some standard, they'll need to convert their data representation into some other arbitrary data representation, right? Same information, but structured in a different way. Very, very common problem. Manipulating schemas between two entities. Here does the same exact thing. Takes the output from the previous one, this XML document over here, and it generates an HTML document. Okay, so this one is the first transformation is so that two machines need to talk to one another, and we need to do the interface between the two, right? So both of them are consuming this data, but it needs to be in the right format. Here, the conversion is between a machine that generated this XML document, but needs to generate it for a human being, right? So it needs to convert it into a human consumable product, right? That would, in this case, would be HTML, right? That needs to be laid out in a particular way with a particular font, with a particular white spaces and whatnot, right? All the things that our frontal cortex needs for parsing content on a page, on a white page. So to do that, you will write a transformer and take the website XML from the previous question and feed it into another transformer that will use this XSL transformation to generate website.html. And it should look like something like this. Website. The parentheses says what styling should it look like. Should it look like an H1? Right? Don't actually render parentheses H1. Okay, use H1 as a tag to render it. Same thing with pages. Here would be listed all the pages, again of type H2, widgets of H2, and then a table that lists a flat representation of the document, listing all the widgets across all pages. Okay, so this one transformed it from a normalized representation to a denormalized representation. Okay, and this one is just going to flatten the representation, right, as a table. So notice that each widget here is of a different type, text, image, YouTube, a button, and so the different values here will be, you'll have some values for depending if it's text, or if it's an image, you'll have a source. If it's a YouTube, you have a URL. For a button, you have a label, right? But most everything else will be just empty. Okay. So to simplify the TA's job to validate this, we're asking you to create a executable. You can compile, you can build your Bootstrap, your Spring Boot. You can compile it as an executable jar file. Okay, so that so submit the jar file. So that well, I'm sorry, it would be a transform.java, right? Transform.java. If you're in Eclipse, if you have your transform.java, you can export the whole thing as a jar file, and then you can have it, or you can just only submit transform.java question1.batch. You compile transform.java and run and convert site XML to website.xml, and then the second one should convert from website.xml to website.html, right? And here are your XSL, your two transformers. Yes? Make sense? All right, awesome. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today, XML, right? And XSL and XPath and how to do all these conversions. Awesome.